Hello everybody, I'm Steve Warshaw. I started Intellis. It used to be called the Warshaw Group. And we make software for capital planning, for schools, and for condition assessments. That's kind of, and there's pretty good words there: resilient plans, data-backed policies. I'm going to unpack some of those words and tell you some stories about how I got to do it. If this was a story about me, this would be a picture of my three daughters. These are the schools that they go to. I have three daughters that go to public school in New York City. And I'm pretty lucky to have written the software that does the assessments of those buildings. And I think the building in the middle was actually planned with the system that I developed. So it's like, it's really, it is. Okay, I got a guess there. Somebody who knows. The story is so how did I get to start developing capital planning software for schools? Like, how does that happen in your life? So what happened, I was lucky enough to be a coder and a structural engineer. I worked on the FCA system in New York City back around 2000, and there was something not so good happened. The results of that condition assessment yielded some budget requests that was way off. And in New York City, when it's way off, it's billions of dollars. So there was a billions of dollar mistake. I just confirmed with John that his predecessor, or a predecessor of his predecessor, lost their job being the leader of the Division of School Facilities in New York over that. And so they decided that they had to build a system that more accurately is going to represent the capital plan. And they said, how are we going to go about this? We have an FCA, we have some data, but yet it's not the right data. So I was very lucky to lead the technology team that implemented the software that did that. I was embedded in what then moved over to the School Construction Authority of New York, and worked very closely with the capital planning folks to define what is a capital plan development system, and then actually to go do it and to evolve it over years. It's still used today. One of the people who started with me at the time, who was at the beginning of their career, is now the CEO of the School Construction Authority. Nina Kubota was one of the people who helped define what this is. And I'll tell you what it is. Before we go completely into it, let's recognize something. This is a graph that I love. John, I don't know if you've ever seen this. The bottom is the number of schools by year built in Manhattan, Staten Island, and Bronx. It's very revealing. The one on the top is a county in South Carolina. I suggest you all plot this. It's a great story. Those red lines represent natural life cycle replacement times. World War II, World War II. It's pretty neat. So, it's a very good way to communicate what's going on in your district and know why you're doing things. What is a resilient data-backed policy decision plan? So it has all the data. It's easily communicated. You could ask what if. You could ask the what if not. It could adjust the reality. It could adjust the policy changes. It could project your condition. It could project your finances. It could project if you're meeting goals. So I think we all kind of do that. But do we do it with a system that can do it easily? So I hate this slide. Why do we plan? I forget why we plan. I've been doing it for so long. I forget the reasons for compliance, to get more funds. I mean, everybody has a good answer to this. So I'm going to let this one go. So the first thing we do, right? We need to create a data-backed decision. So we have to go get the data. And commonly that's an FCA. One of the great things that happened in New York is that they decided to make the assessment ongoing. Not just do it once every 5 years, not do some of the buildings every 5 years. And that was a really good decision. It wasn't an easy decision to come by. The state didn't mandate it. And so they had really good, reliable data all the time. Once a project was done, a new assessment happened. So the condition information became very good. But it's not enough. So, now what is condition assessment? There's software, iPads, people go look at the buildings. They're not doing this in New York. They're not doing this in New York yet, at least not extensively, but roof thermographies is a very good way to get roof information very inexpensively. And there's other ways to get data. If you're just starting, you have data all over your organization, pull it all together. Get that done. Now with AI tools, getting data from the separate systems is much easier than it used to be. And as you're going through a plan, think about other places you have information that's informing your plan, especially once you're operating it. You're bringing data from your ERP for your actual obligations against the plan. You might be bringing updates to schedules of plans from other systems that are actually executing your plan. So we're thinking into not just creating the plan, but actually operating a strategic plan. This is a great slide that I did not create. This shows it's really confusing because down is better. 1 is good, 4 is bad. These are systems that over 5 years of condition assessments in New York, things that did have projects got better, and not equally. So you could start, when you have your capital plan, when you have your assessment regularly, you could actually get better at projecting futures based on your own data. This is, guess what? Places they did not have projects. Now this slide is my favorite slide that is not related to really my topic, and this is thinking about, it's aspirational. This is thinking about how we think, what's the metric for what the benefit of what we're doing. And I've always been trained to measure it in condition of assets and in money. But if we think about how many people use our buildings, how many years of life this impacts of all the students in New York City, it's 1.1 million students. Every year, another 100, 150,000 students enter the system. They have 80 plus years of life, and that's the impact we have. So in capital planning, that's what we're doing. It's pretty neat. I think people should start using this as a metric, actually. Condition assessment, as I said, it's not a one-time and forget about it. It's an ongoing process. So adopt it, do it. Yet, without that, you're not really going to be able to have a sustainable plan that you could operate over time. Produce the book, but don't rely on the book. Use it as data. Now, this is probably the most important slide that I could have done the whole presentation just with this slide. When I say data-backed policies, I mean take your needs assessment and come up with the rules by which you're actually going to do projects. Because a plan is a set of projects. It's not a set of components that need to be fixed. And that was part of the issue, which was the failure that created that $1 million overrun, is that people looked at all the components and said, what if we fix all the components? But nobody ever fixes components. A problem with a component just triggers a project, and then you build a project around that. You scope it out, you schedule it, you come up with the cash flow, and you fit it into your budget. So we found a way to do this programmatically. We interviewed extensively, and we came up with rules to decide what would trigger a project, what were the types of projects, how they lay out over time, and made that an automated process. In other words, you can have a computer algorithm that will scope out all the projects that you might ever do. Of course, you're not going to do them all, so spending money on actually scoping them is a waste of time. You're only going to scope out the projects that you might do in the next year or two. So we came up with ways to do it, and we codified it. Then we said, that's great for the projects that come out from condition, but there's a lot of other projects that do not come from condition. And the most obvious is capacity. So in New York City, there was shortages in capacity. So we came up with rules to come up with other types of projects. We put them all in a bucket, and we said, let's prioritize them. It wasn't that simple because there's a lot of buckets, and they have different funding sources and different rules. And then we said, let's schedule them over time. We call that distribution based on budget constraints. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are doing this and maybe even doing it in systems, but This is a vessel to hold all this knowledge. We now think of knowledge as not only the condition, but actually the policies to come up with projects and the policies to prioritize and schedule a plan. This is the whole life cycle. It's a little bit boring and it gives people headaches, but let me just, sorry.
It's a great slide.
Well, yeah. You like the slide?
I do.
Yeah. People have told me they like it, and people have told me it gives them headaches. So, you know, whichever way you want to go with it. I tried to get the colors to mean something. But really, what this adds here is that if a computer cannot, even with AI, it will not give you what has to happen. There's always things that, you know, there's many expressions, but reality overrides, and people have to put in what actually is going to happen. That's over there. And then everything has to adjust around that to fix things. For instance, if you know that you're realistically not going to be able to start construction in this year and you want to make sure that that obligation hits against next year, adjust that, let things adjust around that, right? You need to bring in realities from other systems, actual obligations. You need to compare to previous plans because sometimes if you promised it in a published document, you got to be careful what you take out, right? Once you do things like that, you could take all those policies and you could run different versions of them, aka scenarios. So let's take the most obvious one. Change your budget. Add a little money to one bucket in 1 year. See what's going to happen. Change your inflation rates. Rerun it. Make an unconstrained budget and set goals. Say, I want to have this much of something, and we could talk about what kind of improvement measures we could set goals as. So that's, and the idea is to do this all in a computer system, right? That is able to update regularly. And New York City is the best that I know, and they update the capital plan daily based on actual obligation. And you have tools. So this is an example of two different scenarios. This is the only difference between these two scenarios is the budget. Each line does not represent a phase of a project. Each line represents a complete project start to end. And just different budget yields different projects in different sequence based on the priorities. This is the similar kind of picture. The red is one budget, the blue is another budget, and this is just what could fit based on the actual distribution. So the ability to do that. So another concept to introduce. So people are used to having prioritization. They're used to having budget constraints. But are they really setting quantitative KPI goals on their plan? And where are they? So this is an example of one. If you have a energy or a sustainability goal, and you could find a way to assign the benefit that the project would introduce to the plan as a whole, set a goal for the year for that number, remove your budget constraints and run it and see how much money it would take to actually meet the goals people set. It does take some requirement for people to be able to quantitatively define that measurement, that goal. But like I took Energy Star as an example because I know how they calculate it, and I know, what, if this is influenced by, let's say, boilers and HVACs, you know what boilers and HVACs you have, you could figure out where you are currently, you could figure out your goal, you could figure out the projects that move that, and then budget it accordingly. And you could spread it out over years, your goals. That's an example of once you have a system like this in place, what you could do to say, what you're asking, how much will it cost, as opposed to what do I have to do with the money you're giving me? I mean, that is the whole story. After this, it's just summary. And so what is a plan? A plan is a list of projects, prioritized to reflect strategy, scheduled over time, constrained by budget, set to meet goals, with scope and cost for every project, and with analysis and explanation created by people or next year by AI. You're laughing. It's real. It's real. Doing it. The benefits are mostly obvious. You kind of get this also. Your planning gets better over time, right? Once you create a process that you've worked hard to define and put into a computer system, you have the benefit of getting it to be improved. Like we looked at those deterioration curves, like we could take and actually look at that and improve how we measure what's going to happen. Because you're collecting a whole bunch of data to support your planning, at a high level of detail, you have a kind of a new kind of single source of the truth. It might not have all the details, but it has all the high level important information. It's kind of a side benefit. The other thing that happens is since we planned it, executed based on the plan, we have stuff that's currently being executed, stuff that has been executed over the last few years, and a 5 to 10 year future projection, all using the same techniques, all using the same level of detail. You now have past, current, and future that you could think about all in one bucket and analyze in one way. And that, it's a little bit hard for me to communicate how useful that is, but the ability to compare past to future is extremely important. It's not like you have a planning system and then you have your project management system and you're trying to compare things. It's all in one place. And obviously, you get a logical, I mean, not everybody wants a logical, transparent plan, but it is a consequence. So change your organization to deal with that, right? Because, you know, people will ask, and I know, and you know, the most successful implementation of this for me is still New York, and they have an audit department, and they have an external audit department that looks at the audit department, right? So, you know, there's people looking at this. Really, I added the word resilient recently, and resilient is about the creation of scenarios, it is about goal setting, and it's about automation, and it's about responsiveness to adjustment. That's what really what resiliency means to me. All that other stuff is good, but that's where resilience sits. That's it for me. I think that's my last slide. That's me. Thanks for listening. Are we doing questions?
I guess,
no?
yeah, we've got like a couple, 3 minutes here. Alex from Fresno, and then we'll go to Mr. Shea.
First of all, thank you. I don't know how many of us have management software, construction management software, that everybody, you get your report and say, okay, can you export it to Excel so I can manipulate and do exactly what you just explained? And so one of the coolest things sitting in your booth, I just want to say thank you for doing this, because this is everything. I know a lot of construction managers, project managers, people that do it as consultant, like I used to do, even as a general contractor, that I'm always doing this kind of thing off the side of my desk just to do a check. The fact that you have a program that can easily just adopt and take information. Here's the cool thing is everything, all your information that you have, the basis of most of the knowledge is kind of an Excel based type format. He can take that out of your system, which is exciting to me, and you can give it to him, give him the logic, and input it into his program and help you track. I think the forecasting costs and looking at cost expenditures and how what is your spending plan going to be is invaluable. So I just want to say thank you for creating this. I was excited about this after I saw. So I love your diagram because it really, you can see each one of us can kind of plug in a certain spot. And so I'm really excited about having an opportunity to talk to you after this.
Oh, I appreciate that. There was no question in there, but but I was like gonna count the questions. I keep track of all the questions and try to answer all of them in sequence. But you did say something. You said I created it, so I can't get all the credit. No, I created in response to needs at a school district, and you know, basically New York City put a lot of effort into this, and then I took it to market in other places. Yeah, so.
So I don't have a question either, but I just wanted to say for the operators and the other facilities directors in the room, I could probably talk for longer than Steve did about this, about the advantages that we use it on the operations side, because it's primarily a capital planning tool, but you don't think about all the many, many things that we use it for on the operations side. And I've had a long career, and before I started with the city, I would work in a number of places where the capital program and the operations program were not under the same vertical. And that's effectively the case we have it here in New York City. The School Construction Authority is a public authority. They're a separate entity from the DOE. And that really opens itself up to some risk if people are not aligned. And this tool is indispensable to making sure that the system operates cohesively and as a unit. If the capital side isn't talking to the operations and vice versa, you're setting yourself up for trouble. And this is, I can't tell you how many times and just this week having conversations with the SCA saying, hey, it might not be the best example, but it's a timely one. We have our door locking project, which is one of the mayor's signature initiatives for locking school doors, and that triggered on the capital side a huge asbestos abatement issue. And something as simple as that, it's like, okay, well, now we just had another $1 million of ACM abatement that we weren't aware of. How does that affect the capital plan? Can we do it? Can't we do it? What do we have to move around? And those conversations, like Steve said, are happening every day. So if you're not doing it, if the capital and the operations are on separate reporting structures, I think it's almost indispensable to have something like this. But if not, there's still so many advantages to having a tool. We use it all the time, and it's terrific.
I appreciate that.
Cool.
Well, it's also Nina Kubota, who is the leader, the counterpart to you at SC. I mean, it's like she developed the system. I was like the computer guy. So, leadership is integrated this into all operations. Anything
Cool.
else?
Let's hear it for Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.